What you are about to hear is not a work of fiction. There are no ghosts, no monsters from myth or legend. The monster in this story was real. He walked the sun-drenched streets of Los Angeles, breathed the same air as movie stars and dreamers, and then vanished, leaving behind a masterpiece of horror so profound it has haunted the city for generations. We are going to peel back the layers of sensationalism and rumor to look into the heart of a true American nightmare. We will explore the official records, the eyewitness accounts, and the chilling evidence of a crime that remains a gaping wound in the soul of Hollywood. This is the story of Elizabeth Short, a young woman who came to the City of Angels seeking stardom, only to become the symbol of its darkest, most depraved secrets. This is the story of the Black Dahlia.
Welcome to the Scary Stories channel with Mr. Murk.
Our story begins in a city built on illusions. Los Angeles, 1947. The Second World War was over, and America was stepping into a new era of prosperity and power. Hollywood was its glittering crown jewel, a factory of dreams that promised fame and fortune to anyone with enough talent, beauty, or sheer, desperate ambition. The city hummed with a restless energy, a place of blinding sunlight and deep, long shadows. It was in these shadows that evil often found its most fertile ground. Into this world walked Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old, a striking figure with porcelain skin, jet black hair, often adorned with a flower, and eyes that held a mix of hope and melancholy. She was one of thousands of young women who had flocked to the West Coast, drawn by the magnetic pull of the silver screen. She had no acting credits to her name, no connections, just a fragile dream and a smile that, by all accounts, could stop your heart. She was a transient, a ghost in her own life, drifting between cheap hotel rooms, boarding houses, and the temporary kindness of acquaintances. She worked odd jobs as a waitress, but her real ambition lay in the studio, lots she could never quite get into. Those who knew her described her as a girl who was always waiting for her big break, for a phone call that never came, for a man who might save her. She was beautiful, but she was also vulnerable, lost in the sprawling, indifferent metropolis. The week leading up to her death is a murky, confusing puzzle. On January 9, 1947, she was dropped off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles after a brief trip to San Diego with a married salesman. She made a few phone calls from the hotel lobby. Then, she walked out of the grand entrance and into the cool California night. No one who knew her would ever see her alive again. For 6 days, Elizabeth Short simply ceased to exist. She vanished from the world, swallowed whole by the city's anonymous darkness. The world would not hear her name again until her re-emergence, when she would become infamous in a way she could never have imagined in her wildest, most terrifying nightmares. The morning of January 15, 1947, was cold and clear in Leimert Park, a developing suburb of Los Angeles. A young mother named Betty Bersinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter, pushing her stroller along the sidewalk on Norton Avenue. The area was sparse, dotted with new houses and wide, empty lots overgrown with weeds. As she walked past one of these vacant lots, something caught her eye. Lying in the damp grass, about 50 feet from the sidewalk, was what she first thought was a discarded store mannequin. It was unnaturally white, and it seemed to have been broken in the middle. Curious, she moved a little closer. The initial impression of plastic and plaster dissolved into a wave of sickening, paralyzing realization. This was no mannequin. It was the body of a woman. And it was not broken. It had been cut. Betty Bersinger snatched her child and ran to the nearest house, her mind reeling from the impossible, grotesque image burned into her memory. She frantically used the phone to call the police, her voice trembling with a horror she could barely articulate. The call that came into the Los Angeles Police Department was the first tremor of an earthquake that would shake the city to its very foundations. The first officers on the scene were hardened veterans, men who had seen the grim realities of urban violence. But nothing could have prepared them for this. The body of Elizabeth Short was laid out with a chilling, deliberate precision. She had been severed at the waist with surgical skill, her two halves placed a foot apart. Her body was completely drained of blood, giving her skin a waxy, marble-like pallor. It was scrubbed clean, meticulously washed, as if the killer wanted no biological trace of himself left behind, only the spectacle of his work. But it was her face that was the true signature of the killer's sadism. Her mouth had been carved open, from ear to ear, creating a hideous, permanent grin known as a Glasgow smile. It was a mocking, terrifying parody of the beautiful smile she once had. She wasn't just murdered, she was curated. Her body was posed, her arms raised above her head, her legs spread slightly apart. This wasn't a crime of passion, a frenzied attack. This was a statement. An artist, in his own deranged mind, presenting his masterpiece to the world. The crime scene itself was an enigma. There was no blood on the ground, confirming she had been killed elsewhere. There were no footprints other than those of the officers. No tire tracks, no fibers, no clues of any kind. It was as if the body had been gently lowered from the heavens. The killer had left behind only his victim, a perfectly staged tableau of human butchery designed for maximum psychological impact. Within hours, the press descended on the scene like vultures. This was a story made for headlines, combining the potent elements of Hollywood, a beautiful young victim, and a murder of unparalleled brutality. The Los Angeles Examiner and the Herald Express locked in a ruthless circulation war, threw journalistic ethics to the wind. They called Elizabeth's mother and tricked her into giving them personal details about her daughter by claiming she had won a beauty contest, only to reveal the horrific truth moments later. It was the press that gave her the name that would make her immortal, the Black Dahlia. It was a moniker born from the 1946 film noir, The Blue Dahlia, and a rumor that Elizabeth favored sheer black clothing. The name stuck. It was evocative, mysterious, and tragic. Elizabeth Short, the person, began to disappear, replaced by a legend, a two-dimensional victim in a citywide horror show. The investigation became the largest and most intense in LAPD history up to that point. Every detective was put on the case. They chased down thousands of leads, interviewing hundreds of potential suspects. The city was gripped by a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was the killer a doctor, given the surgical precision of the cuts? Was it a jealous lover? A powerful Hollywood executive with a dark secret to protect? The investigation delved into Elizabeth's life, painting a picture of a lonely young woman who often told tall tales to make her life seem more glamorous than it was, and who accepted rides and dinners from a string of men, many of whom were now suspects. The police were drowning in information, most of it useless, but the most chilling developments were yet to come. The killer, it turned out, was not finished. He was watching, and he wanted to play. On January 21, a week after the body was found, the first direct communication from the murderer arrived. An anonymous caller, claiming to be the killer, phoned the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, James Richardson. The caller congratulated Richardson on the newspaper's coverage and said he would soon be sending him some of Elizabeth's souvenirs to prove he was the real deal. He finished the call with a chilling promise. There will be a letter following. 3 days later, a package arrived at the newspaper office. It was a manila envelope, carefully addressed using individual words and letters cut and pasted from magazines and newspapers, a classic menacing trope come to life. The first thing the mail clerk noticed was the smell. It had been wiped clean with gasoline. Inside was a collection of Elizabeth Short's personal belongings, her social security card, her birth certificate, photographs, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. Mark Hansen, a local nightclub owner and a known acquaintance of Elizabeth's, was immediately a prime suspect, but was eventually cleared. Every item in the package had also been wiped with gasoline. The killer was methodical, intelligent, and taunting the very people who were hunting him. He was proving he had been with her, that he held the power, and that he was smarter than them. Soon after, a handwritten letter arrived. It was a messy, rambling note that read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." More letters would appear, some pasted together from movie ads, others scrawled by hand. One read, "I will give up in Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." The police were being played with, led on a wild goose chase by a phantom who seemed to revel in the chaos he had created. He was a ghost in the machine, a faceless terror who held all the cards. The entire city of Los Angeles was his audience, and the police were unwilling actors in his gruesome play. The investigation spiraled into a vortex of confusion and dead ends. Over 500 people were investigated as suspects. More than 60 individuals, mostly men seeking a pathetic moment of fame, confessed to the murder. Each confession had to be meticulously checked and debunked, wasting thousands of hours of police time. The theories became more elaborate, more conspiratorial. Some pointed to Dr. George Hodel, a prominent Los Angeles physician with a genius eye, Q, and a dark, sinister private life. His own son, years later, would build a compelling case against him, suggesting Hodel was a serial killer with ties to surrealist art. But the evidence remained circumstantial. Others believed the killer was part of a secret Hollywood cabal, and that Elizabeth had stumbled upon a secret she wasn't supposed to know. The truth, however, remained frustratingly out of reach. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The letters ceased. The taunting phone calls ended. The trail, which had once been a blazing inferno of leads and speculation, grew cold. then froze over completely. Killer, having held the entire city captive with his reign of psychological terror, simply retreated back into the shadows from whence he came. He vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a legacy of fear and a question that would never be answered. The Black Dahlia case was never officially closed, but it faded from the front pages, replaced by new crimes and new scandals. Yet, it never truly went away. It became a permanent scar on the psyche of Los Angeles, a dark legend whispered in the corners of the city. It served as a grim reminder that beneath the glittering facade of Hollywood, something truly monstrous could be lurking. Final sequence. Slow, panning shots of the Biltmore Hotel. Today, the empty lot in Limert Park. And finally, a hauntingly beautiful photograph of the real Elizabeth Short, smiling. Narrator, decades have passed. The detectives who worked the case are all gone. The suspects have taken their secrets to the grave. The Los Angeles of 1947 is a distant memory, a black and white world that exists now only in photographs and films. But the ghost of Elizabeth Short remains. Her murder is more than just an unsolved crime. It is a modern American folktale, a cautionary story about the perils of ambition and the darkness that can consume the innocent. The killer achieved a sort of twisted immortality. He remains faceless, nameless, a specter, unpunished evil. He lived out his life, perhaps dying peacefully in his bed as an old man, while the identity of the young woman he destroyed was forever fused with the gruesome details of her death. The most terrifying part of this story is its silence. The silence of the 6 days she was missing. The silence of a trail gone cold. And the ultimate silence of a killer who was never caught. He walked away from one of the most horrific crimes of the 20th century without consequence, his identity locked away forever. Elizabeth Short came to Hollywood to have her name put in lights. In a tragic, cruel twist of fate, she did. But her name lives on not as the star she dreamed of becoming, but as a symbol of a nightmare. A nightmare that began on a cold January morning in a vacant lot, and for the city of Los Angeles, has never truly ended.